Good evening, everyone. This is Greg Chanis, the town manager at Tiburon. Just letting folks know that we don't currently have a quorum of commissioners to start the meeting. We anticipate having a quorum at approximately 7 o'clock. So I apologize for the delay, but we are going to move forward with the meeting once we have a quorum. Again, we are predicting that'll be around 7 o'clock. So we look forward to seeing you in just a bit. Yeah.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for your patience. Welcome to the Planning Commission meeting of February 28th. I would like to call the meeting to order. Staff, may we have roll call?
Commissioner Woodward,
Present.
Commissioner Sai,
Finally here.
Chair Williams,
Present.
and Commissioner DeFever and Commissioner Amir are absent.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, before we get to our agenda items for the evening, now would be an opportunity for anyone in the audience, either here in person or on Zoom, to speak to any matter that does not appear on tonight's agenda. If there's anyone who wishes to address the commission, now's the time. I don't see anyone here with us in the room. Is there anyone online or on Zoom?
Chair Williams, there are no hands raised.
Great, thank you. So we'll move to,
I'm Ryan Camaro.
is this on step to the podium and you'd state your name. And is this on a matter that doesn't appear on our agenda for the evening? Oh, you're probably right. So yeah, perfect. Yeah, yeah.
Hi, I'm Ryan Camus, and I'm here for Ballet Studio at the Cove Shopping Center for a review. Yeah, we submitted our, sorry, I can't think of the name right now. It's conditional use permit for the Cove Shopping Center Suite 7. Yeah, Blackfield Drive. Touching base on if the permit is going to be looked at today. Or
Great, okay.
just seeing what the process.
Thank you
is.
so much for bringing that to our attention. We appreciate it. Okay. All right. Well, I think that concludes that portion of the agenda. So we'll move on. If there's a staff briefing for the commission, we'll hear that now.
Chair Williams, there's no staff briefing tonight.
Excellent. All right. We do have some minutes tonight to review. Those are the minutes of October 25th, 2023. I know Vice Chair Amir and Commissioner DeFever were absent for that meeting, but we do have all those who were at the meeting are present with us tonight. Yay. So I have just a few minor edits, but I'll find out if my fellow commissioners have any comments or edits, revisions to the minutes. Give Commissioner Sai a minute to take a breath.
I'll need many breaths, but no, I don't have any questions or comments about the minutes.
I just have a couple of minor, only because this was an important issue. There's a few areas to clarify on page 21. And it's I'm going to look at line 24 at the very end, where the words about it and then comma. And after the comma, I would just add a desire. 24. It, comma, do you see the about it, comma, too? I can read the sentence for you. Yeah, after the comma, just adding a desire to consider more sites downtown. Then line 31, the town council disagreed with the PC. I would just revise the next sentence to the PC has made recommendations. Line 33, speaking about the town council now, it says they are not hearing from constituents, but they are hearing from constituents across the community. So they just delete the not. And then one last minor edit, line 35. This is where it starts, they gave. I would just eliminate them, the word them. They gave more time to consider rezoning. Great, that's all I have. Okay, if I may, I would move to approve the minutes as amended and ask for a second.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the motion carries. And we'll go on to the public hearing agenda item, which is a consideration of a town and initiated zoning amendments to the municipal code relating to sidewalk dining. Is there staff report? I think there's a presentation tonight.
Yes, Chair Williams, thank you, and members of the commission. Good evening. I'm not here very often. Good to see you. I'm going to give a very brief intro and then turn it over to Bob Brown, the consultant that's been working on this project for us. As council knows, back on the onset of COVID, the town instituted an emergency permit policy that allowed dining establishments to seek a permit to have outdoor dining on town right of way, essentially the sidewalks in front of their buildings. The program proved very popular, and although the emergency associated with COVID is now over, there's staff was instructed to research and put together a permitting process that would allow that type of use to continue on a permit basis. So tonight you are going to be hearing a presentation from Bob Brown on the research he's done and the proposal for modifying our code to establish that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bob.
There we go. Very good. Thank you, Greg, for operating the PowerPoint. So as the city manager says, we're looking to create a process and regulations for ongoing licenses for use of, strictly we're talking about the public sidewalk, the public right of way tonight, not outdoor dining that might occur on private property. That would still be under current process. So right now, what your municipal code has in terms of regulations for use of the public sidewalk for eating and drinking establishments includes the issuance of a conditional use permit, an encroachment permit, and a right-of-way agreement. And as the city manager mentioned, the town council gave authorization during the pandemic for the city manager to issue these temporary agreements, which actually 6 were approved and issued for these businesses that are shown on the screen. And they are still operating on the public sidewalk today. So again, the town's interest, other than supporting local business, is to convert these temporary agreements into ongoing licenses and to adopt regulations that are standardized for outdoor dining installations, both to protect the public safety and also to protect the town from liability. So what is proposed are changes to the zoning code that are fairly limited. And these would include making sidewalk dining a permitted use in the Main Street and mixed use districts, and also specifically exempting outdoor dining area from the calculation of parking requirements. And in addition, the new regulations are proposed to be located in Title V, which is the Public Works section of the code, in a new Chapter 19B sidewalk dining. And I should mention that both state law and local law require the Planning Commission to make recommendations to the council on any changes to the zoning code or the general plan. But that's not the case with other modifications or amendments to the municipal code. So that's why the resolution, the draft resolution in your packet only deals with these 2 zoning code amendments. We also put in your packet the actual regulations that are proposed in this new Chapter 19B. And since they are still in the Public Works chapter, but also sort of get into the issue of land use, which is a Planning Commission responsibility. If the commission wants to make any comments or suggestions regarding those regulations, we will then be happy to take those as well to the town council, who will be reviewing this matter next week. I should also mention at this point that we have had 2 meetings with Zoom meetings with several restaurateurs locally and the Chamber of Commerce, one back in December and one that occurred just yesterday. And I think in general, they were, mostly answering asking questions. Not really much in the way of feedback other than in the December meeting, the issue of possibly allowing only electric space heaters came up and prohibiting gas or propane as an environmental issue. And the restaurateurs weren't very excited about that possibility. And so that aspect was removed from the initial draft. So what I'd like to do now is quickly summarize the proposed regulations that are to be in the code. And so first, in terms of process, in terms of streamlining, the suggestion is to eliminate the use permit requirement. So all of these restaurants or bars would already have a use permit for their interior operations. So we're not asking them to modify that to add outdoor dining. But what we would propose doing is keeping the current requirements you have in your code for encroachment permits and right-of-way agreements. And these are issued by Public Works. And importantly, they incorporate regulations that require a hold harmless and liability waiver and also liability insurance to protect the town. Another issue that really is not coming before the Planning Commission, the commission does not deal with fees. But there is the potential for the council to consider a rental fee annually for use of the right of way. So that's an issue that we'll be talking to the council about next week. In terms of use restrictions, the proposal is to allow the businesses to occupy the sidewalk only in front of their business frontage. In this case, there would also be no in-street parklets. Main Street is just not wide enough to accommodate that. And so that really eliminates a lot of the issues that a lot of other cities have dealt with in terms of parklets. Just dealing with the sidewalk is quite a bit simpler. There is a provision, though, in the proposals to allow a restaurant or bar to use an adjacent frontage if that adjacent property owner and business owner consent to that as well. The proposal would exempt outdoor dining, as I mentioned, from parking regulations. It would also prohibit outdoor cooking and outdoor entertainment unless the business owner sought an amendment to their use permit. Most of the regulations relate to safety. And so first and foremost, there's a requirement to maintain a 48-inch pedestrian path of travel. So as not to run afoul of the Americans with Disabilities Act or state regulations. There's also a proposed 2-foot setback for any of the fixtures, seating, tables, etc., from the curb face. And the purpose of that is to not have patrons tipping back into the street or having, the portable heaters or whatever tumbling into the right of way. There is the provision, though, that if a restaurateur wishes to have seats or fixtures closer than that 2 feet, they can be allowed to do so if they install a safety barrier. And we'll talk about the design of that in a minute. There's also a requirement for setbacks from driveways, street intersections, corners, alleys, and that's to provide a clear line of sight for drivers for safety purposes. There's also a requirement for a 3-foot clearance for the space heaters to any combustible materials. And also a requirement that any new electrical outlets, wiring, gas piping, those would still require building permits to be allowed. This is a photo of 2 of the existing businesses that do have tables and chairs within that 2-foot setback that we're proposing from the curb face. So in this type of situation, that's where one of these safety barriers would be needed to maintain those tables and chairs in that location. And the safety barriers, they're proposed to be 3 feet high to allow, again, visibility over them. And the idea is to have the town specify what the design would be for these barriers. And the idea is a pretty simple tubular metal design. And the idea there is for some consistency if multiple businesses choose to install these barriers. And also requirement, again, if they're bolted to the sidewalk, that upon removal, the business owner be responsible for repair of the sidewalk. There's also regulations for landscape planters or pots, some height limits to make sure they aren't either tripping hazards or impede visibility, material choices, and also a requirement that the plants be maintained. There's a vertical clearance for canopies and umbrellas and also for string lights. Again, given the narrowness of the sidewalk, there is a prohibition on any overhead enclosures, structures, trellises, that sort of thing. And again, since you're not dealing with parklets, probably not really much of an interest in those. And then finally, there's a restriction on adding additional signage, either to, umbrellas or partitions or whatever. But just only restricting this to what the sign ordinance allows for the business itself. So the recommendations for the commission tonight, conduct the public hearing, make a recommendation to the council specifically on the zoning code amendments, which is the draft resolution that's in your packet. And then again, any comments or suggestions you have about the actual regulations that would be in the public works section of the code, we'd be happy to take those and transmit those to the council. And that is it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Very nice presentation. Are there any questions for staff or for Mr. Brown on the presentation?
Bob, I have a couple of questions for you. You had a slide on use regulations that had, I think, the safety barrier put up there. I guess my question is, if you could go back to the slide, I think there was an example
Can do.
of a safety barrier. That slide you were just on a moment
Okay,
ago.
let me go back.
With the railing.
Yeah, that one right there,
Okay.
actually before, yeah, this one before the railing.
All right.
So the next slide is the one that has an example of a railing.
Mhm.
I wanted to focus on this particular slide because I think this depicts right outside of, what is that, Squalo Vino, maybe?
That is one of the businesses, yes.
What theoretically would that safety barrier look like as shown in the picture on the left?
Bob, do you want me to, maybe I can jump in on that. So the idea is to allow businesses that want to move into that 2-foot. So essentially the regulation without a safety barrier would require that nothing could be within 2 feet of the edge of the curb, the painted red curb. The proposed ordinance would allow people to move into that 2-foot space, but what we envision is a 3-foot high metal tubular black, essentially short sections of fence that will be installed right about where the curb meets the brick. And then we would allow the chairs and tables to be as close as they could get to that safety barrier.
Would that be a permanent fixture?
It'd be permanent in the sense that, as Bob mentioned, our intent is to have that be a standard design, meaning the town would dictate what it is and would also dictate the way it's secured to the sidewalk. What we envision is metal flanges that are screwed, that are essentially lag bolted down through the brick into the concrete. I checked with the building official and he felt comfortable that that would work. We're in the process of trying to, spec out exactly what product we would require folks to use.
And I assume that in this context, the safety barrier would only extend laterally in terms of the coverage of the property. Who would pay for that? It wasn't clear to me in the proposed regs how that gets paid for.
The applicant would pay. And they would have to also apply for a building permit to install it.
My next question relates to an issue of consistency in terms of how things look. But if it sounds like I'm trying to wade into design review, I'm not. That is something I'm interested in. But I mean, I am, but not interested in getting into. But what is the plan with respect to maintaining consistency either of, and so I'll give you a couple of things. One, the safety barriers we just talked about. Two, some of the tables and chairs, right? I assume that there's not going to be such granular detail as far as requirements that it's all orange, it's all, that kind of thing.
No.
But what is the expected plan with respect to maintaining consistency in that regard?
And Bob can jump in if I get this wrong, but the only element of the ordinance that requires consistency is what you mentioned. The safety barrier will be literally one product that if you are asking to be 2 feet within 2 feet of the curb edge, you will be required to use the product we specify. And if there were 3 installations like that along Main Street, they would all be identical. That one may be longer than the other, but the way the height, the look, the product would be exactly the same. In terms of consistency with regards to applicant supplied furniture or planters, the proposed ordinance doesn't require any consistency at all. There is a section of the ordinance that requires the applicant or the licensee to keep the area clean and maintained and move the furniture on the schedule that the town cleans the sidewalk periodically, and doesn't allow any additional advertising on umbrellas or hanging signs. But in terms of, for instance, the model or style of chairs or color of the proposed ordinance doesn't contemplate dictating that to the applicant. I mean, as you see now, there's a variety of furnishings in front of each individual business chosen by the business owner, and consistent with what they believe is the look that they're wanting in terms of their business. So
I have just a couple of more questions, if I may,
Mhm.
Madam Chair. So one of them is in connection with umbrellas, and you'll just have to point this out to me if I missed it. Does the proposed regulation speak to the issue of umbrellas in terms of overhang into the street? The potentiality for that?
I believe Bob's probably best.
I think it does.
Yeah, I think it does too. I think it says nothing can hang over the
I
edge of the curb or-
believe so.
It talks about minimum clearance from the ground.
Shall be located completely within the dining area's permitted boundaries.
There you go. Yeah.
And that'll be established by the right-of-way agreement, encroachment permit.
And then my final question is somewhat of a two-parter. It's, I think, based on the proposed regs, that the approval for this use is through the town manager.
Believe it's the town manager or his designee or their designee.
Is that the same language that's used for other decisions of the sort that are ordinarily decided by the?
Well,
planning
actually,
department?
normally what you'd see now in our code, particularly as it relates to the public works section, is that there's a lot of references in our code to the town engineer.
Uh-huh.
The reason we're switching it to the town manager or their designee is the way public works is currently structured. We don't have typically there's a public works director who is also the town engineer. Our current public works structure has 2 division managers, neither of whom are our town engineer. We are contracting for town engineer services, and we don't anticipate that structure and changing anytime soon. So in terms of flexibility, we've chosen to make it the town manager or their designee.
And is your expectation, Greg, that the designee will be the Public Works Department or the town engineer?
It would more than likely either be the community development director
Yeah.
or the engineering division manager of public works. Or I may just decide to sign off on the permits myself. So
Yeah, that's the only thing that I was curious about, because in terms of maintaining consistency, in terms of how these things are either approved, or I suppose in some instances they're not. It sounds like there's still a permitted use process. It seems like we would want to make sure that it's with the right department, which is one of the reasons why I asked about the language that's
Yeah,
used.
yeah.
And I'm in that same regard, and this is mostly a question, is whether it would be possible for us to have something in there, in the proposed regs, that requires approval of what is being proposed, right? So not just the fact of 4 tables and an umbrella, but what the chairs, what the tables are proposed to be, what the umbrella is proposed to be.
yeah, that's a great question. I think in terms of how I view it is that each business is unique and will have their own unique potential style and look, many of which will be, most and hopefully all will be acceptable. I think to start introducing into this process, sort of design requirements would make it a little more unwieldy and awkward. And at this point, the proposal is sort of for straight up a permitting process without specific design requirements other than the safety barrier that we mentioned and several of the other things we mentioned, no advertising. And we would leave it to the businesses, assuming that it's in their best interest to have a quality, good looking product, understanding that beauty or good looking furniture is somewhat in the eye of the beholder as well. And that the town doesn't necessarily want one, for instance, every business to have the exact type of furniture outside.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Woodward, any questions?
I think my questions were adequately addressed by Chair Sai or Commissioner Sai. So thank you. I'm good.
I agree. Commissioner Sai always gets right to the point and asks, always asks excellent questions. I did one on the barrier. I did read in the staff memorandum, and just for the public, that they're permanent to the extent that they're sort of affixed and they have permanence, but that it is the restaurant's responsibility, the applicant's responsibility to restore the sidewalk.
Exactly.
If and when they're removed.
Absolutely. The barriers were to be removed. We would expect the permittee licensee to restore the sidewalk. And in this case, what we envision is literally for each post, 4 small holes that are drilled, and we would expect them to fill it in color to match the Berkif. So.
Right, right. And my question's also related, were covered by Commissioner Sai. They related to consistency and safety, which it sounds to me it was a part of your thinking as you were putting together the regulations. Did you get on the question of consistency and just aesthetics and quality? Did you, well, let's say aesthetics, aesthetic consistency. Did you get feedback in thinking through whether or not to be, to put in specific regulations as to the design of and type of pots and furniture? Did you get feedback from the restaurants on that? I know you've talked with the various establishments, and was there any feedback or request that some flexibility be allowed?
That would be a Bob question. I think I didn't participate in the first stakeholder meeting, so.
Well, we basically said that we weren't going to be doing design review and weren't having, standard requirements in terms of the types or design of fixtures, except for the safety barriers. Because again, those are right out on the street edge and very visible. So, and again, we wanted somebody that was very low key. So that was really the only thing. And I think the restaurateurs appreciated the fact that they could, add their own, touch of design to what they have in front of their restaurants or.
Great, thank you. I know we do have one piece of late mail that does address some concerns along those lines. Have you heard from other community members just over the course, since we've had this outdoor dining? Has there been any feedback from the community as to how they feel about?
We don't have any official sort of late mail or correspondence from it. I can just tell you from the past 2.5 years of,
Anecdotal.
experiencing
Yeah.
it's there, the response to having outdoor dining has been overwhelmingly positive. With the only concerns we generally hear are the safety issues. Sometimes we hear, the chairs are too close. So we tell the restaurateurs to make sure you're maintaining that 48-inch, path of travel. But beyond that, the whole concept of it has been overwhelmingly supported, from my opinion, by the community. Certainly
And
from what
what
I've heard.
is on the kind of enforcement of the regulations? How does that work? Are they checked? Would there be check-ins to ensure that, or is it only in the response to a complaint or a concern?
Wait, as you probably have heard, us say several times in our, the town doesn't have dedicated code enforcement staff. Maybe someday in the future we will. In this instance, because although the program has been ongoing, it is an opportunity to refresh and remind any permittees of what the regulations are. We would certainly ensure that when permits are issued, when and if, permits are issued, the initial installation meets the requirements. And, beyond that, if people do raise concerns, we would, go out and check and make sure that they're in compliance still. And certainly we can periodically go down, but, I'm just being honest, we don't have staff
Right.
that's out there every day doing code
Dedicated staff to
enforcement.
that. Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Those are my questions. And I think we'll give the public an opportunity to weigh in as well. So I'll open up the public comment period. If there's anyone here who wishes to speak. Or anyone on Zoom. I don't think there's anyone in the room. So any,
Chair Williams, there's nobody on Zoom with the hand raised.
okay, so I'll close the public comment and return it to the commission for deliberation. Get my thoughts from my fellow commissioners. Who would like to begin?
Oh, I'll start.
Go for it.
So.
One in. first one.
Exactly. That's your
The
punishment.
last So I'm generally supportive of this. And the reason I am is because I think, number one, providing flexibility for businesses that have a logical use for outdoor space enhances, I think, the appeal of Main Street, Arc Row, and all of the areas that are described in the staff report. I think it enhances the ability of the town to become an even more welcoming place. So as a general matter, I find that this is a positive thing. Number two, relatedly, it is also something that is by a matter of practice, something that the town has allowed. And although COVID is kind of a bit of a blip in that regard, I think that it has shown us that there is room for this in a positive way that improves the town and the opportunities for consumers and the public to be able to engage with the businesses in that area in a better way. Number three, I think that what this also does in terms of allowing this is also allows us to put in some measures that first and foremost, and it is first and foremost, ensure safety. That's the alpha and omega, I think, of everything that we do here, that Greg is doing as town manager. And I think that is important to codify in a way that frankly doesn't exist right now. I will say number four, that, and this is one of the reasons I asked the question of Greg a moment ago about some of the mechanics of how this would work on a day-to-day level. I do think kind of two subparts to this. Number one, that we should consider being a little more specific about who does the approval. I can appreciate, and I don't have that much of an issue with the fact that it's similar language we use in other contexts, that it's the town manager or his or her designee. To the extent that it is something that would be approved by planning, community and planning, I think it would be appropriate to specifically designate it as being something for them to decide, or the town engineer. The reason I'm suggesting a little more specificity is not because I think granular is always better, but because it provides for something I do have a bit of a concern about, and that is consistency and ensuring that there is a consistent process for how this gets approved in the future. The second subpart to this is that I do believe that we should consider putting language in the proposed reg, which is specified in Exhibit 2, that has as an additional use restriction something that speaks to general requirements for the appearance of what are referred to as the appurtenances, which are the tables and chairs and umbrellas. That is not to say, my suggestion for the two of you to think about is that it should be something that smacks of design review, that it needs to be color and shape, nothing of the sort. Instead, I think that we can build in pretty general language that simply speaks to the idea that, and again, it would flow after number 6, maintenance. It would be a number 7. We could perhaps call it appearance. And it'd be general language that says that the appurtenances that are being proposed by the applicant must conform with general requirements that are otherwise set forth and what other kinds of regulations that we have. Again, purposely general in nature. The reason for it is because I think although it's purposely granular, it actually ends up providing a lot of flexibility for the town and looking at various things that at the forefront could later become issues down the road. If a applicant comes in There's no discussion about what exactly is going to be put on the sidewalks. And as it turns out, it's something that is either dangerous, which would be the worst case scenario, or something that just does not fit in with the environment. That kind of language built into what's proposed to be Chapter 19B sidewalk dining would build in some of that ability for either community planning, the town engineer, et cetera, to be able to say, hey, we're here to provide that consistency. I'm happy to move at the right time if it's something that the two of you are interested in supporting, but with that, I find that this is a very positive thing. I'm glad the town is moving towards adopting and formalizing what has existed in practice. I just think with that little bit of a tweak, I think we'll have a very good product on our hands.
Thank you. Commissioner Woodward.
Yes, I mean, first and foremost, I think we need to get rid of the word appurtenances. Very difficult to say. Doesn't feel like real language. I agree with Commissioner Sai. And in fact, I was looking at Exhibit 3 of the document, and not that I'd want to, parrot Mill Valley or any other specific jurisdiction, but I did find that particular design criteria around the furnishings, not appurtenances, but around the furnishings, where it says furnishings compatible with character of adjacent buildings and design guidelines in general plan, and sort of back to the safety issue, and of durable materials and construction. And, that may not be perfect for us, but again, I think to your point, it does help. And I definitely wanted to avoid kind of forcing a consistent theme across all of Main Street, because although it is a landmark, use area, and we have a lot of requirements for what the exteriors of the buildings look like, they don't all look the same. And so you don't want it to look, like Disneyland or some other, made up place. And I think that the photos were really well presented and the presentation was well presented. You could see each storefront or merchant retailer had thought through, what they put outside that matched the character of their own place. And so I think we should encourage that. But again, having that criteria there. So Mill Valley was one, and I think San Mateo also had something with some similar, requirements. So
As did Nevada.
as did Nevada. So yes, maybe that was the second one. Yeah. San Mateo was just worried about it being heavy enough that didn't get blown away, which I also thought was relevant in our world. So, but that was the main thing, and could easily support this. I think that's a relatively easy bullet point to add in from my perspective. So.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, I agree very strongly with both of my fellow commissioners. Just looking at the sort of the findings that we're encouraged to make as part of our process as we make recommendations to the town council, I think is clearly not only is consistent with the general plan and with the sort of the spirit of our objectives and goals for the community. It really is bringing the general plan to life, and it's furthering the goals of the general plan. And I do think it's been a positive, the silver lining, I guess, of COVID is that we have discovered these new ways of interacting and living within our communities. And I certainly have experienced this sidewalk dining in a positive way, and I'm not surprised to hear that many in the community have as well. My concerns were very specific to safety and consistency, and I was really encouraged by the conversation that we had with staff that those were factors that were taken into consideration as these regulations were being developed. So that these things are being addressed. I do agree. I agree with Commissioner Woodward that I wouldn't want to see everything looking exactly the same. I think that takes away from the uniqueness of the individual establishments. And I find it interesting to see variety and diversity out there in the world. But it really more consistency as to quality and durability, I think, is very important. And I think that's sort of what we're all getting at. And so that language that is used that Mill Valley uses, I think addresses that in a way that's satisfactory to me. So I would encourage us to adopt that language, and furnishings is a perfectly fine word. So those are my comments. I think we're sort of all in agreement in terms of the recommendations we'd make to the Tiburon, which is, you know, we're supportive of these amendments, and would encourage the Tiburon to adopt them, with this additional language around consistency of and the types of furnishings that are used.
What I've done just now is
Yeah.
taken a look at and
Excellent.
incorporated some language just for
Excellent.
purposes of clarity of the record of what we might be suggesting and coalescing.
So I think that's really important in our role tonight.
So this would be an addition to 19B-2 standards, subdivision A, and it would be a new number 7. And so it would follow 6, which is maintenance, and 7 could be, for example, appearance.
Mm.
And the language taken to the point of Commissioner Woodward, which he made an excellent point, might be something like this. The furnishings related to the surface of the outdoor dining area shall be compatible with the character of the main structures and design guidelines of the general plan. Such furnishings shall also be of durable materials and construction. What I did was almost verbatim of what's in Mill Valley, taken a little bit too from Novato's, which is there in helpful exhibit number 3. I'm happy to repeat that for staff who I know always is struggling with us spitting out all these suggestions. Just don't say appurtenance. And I took that out because it was a good suggestion. But I mentioned what I just said out loud to the two of you because I think that's what it could look like.
Mhm.
And I'm in agreement with the thoughts that y'all provided in that regard.
If I could have it
Yes.
one more time?
Yep.
Sure. So this would be a new number 7 under subdivision A, I
Appearance.
think it is, appearance. The furnishings related to the surface of the outdoor dining area shall be compatible with the character of the main structures. And
That with the appearance of the main structures,
yes, shall be compatible with the character
character of the main structures.
of the main
Okay.
structures and design guidelines of the general plan. Such furnishings shall also be of durable materials and construction.
Got it.
One question I have on just that language is when you say the furnishings relating to the surface, and I see you're sort of borrowing from the language of the above provision on maintenance. And I think of the surface as the street surface as opposed to just the furnishings related to the outdoor dining area. Is there a reason to include that language?
There's not, and I'm glad you pointed that out because I think you identified maybe some just excess needless
Yeah.
language. I wonder if we just get rid of the surface of. So, Bob, it would say
Mhm.
the furnishings related to
To the
the
outdoor
outdoor dining area.
area.
Excellent. Great. I think that's good language.
Before we vote, could I offer one
Yes,
more
please.
comment?
Yes.
So I just wanted to acknowledge which you had touched on, but the late mail that we received. And I thought there were some excellent points in the mail. But in particular, you know, I think the focus here is activating downtown, which the writer of the letter acknowledged was a good idea. And then, you know, kind of a focus on some specific challenges. And I do feel like the plan that was put forth actually addresses, if not all, I think, you know, you could argue all, but the vast majority of the issues raised. So I did want to just acknowledge, we appreciate that type of input, even if they can't be here. Thought it was thoughtful, well-written, and but I do think that the plan that we're putting forth here to approve really addresses that, so.
I would agree with that. Yeah, thank you so much for clarifying that. Okay, so I think if there's yeah,
The only other issue I think for the three of us to talk about, if there's a discussion about it, it was the second suggestion I had made about specifying who would approve. And again, I'm not sure I know the thoughts that y'all have on it, but I think it could be helpful to have that only because it does allow us to ensure that there's going to be some consistency of how this is going to be decided. It does seem to me, but I welcome staff's opinion if I'm wrong about it, that community and planning would probably be the right place for that to be housed were the commission to make that recommendation. Do you agree? Any of you?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean, it's a little bit of a, it's a little bit of a gray area, right? Because we're talking about public right of way, which is typically the purview of Public Works. But we're also talking about the look and use of the downtown, which is typically the purview of the Community Development Department. So it's a little bit of a hybrid. Typically, when permits of this type come in, whether they're encroachment permits or even CUPs that have to do with outdoors at all, whoever the lead is, we always circulate the application with all the department heads, and Public Works, if they're in a secondary role, typically provides comments on any application that comes in as it relates to the town right of way. I don't have a strong feeling about this. The reason we did it the way we did was we recognized the particular structure of the Public Works Department at this time doesn't have a town employed town engineer as a staff member. And we didn't think it was appropriate to have a contract town engineer be the person who had to sign off on these projects. So we reverted to what we normally do, which is the town manager or designee to give some flexibility.
That's very helpful, Greg. Thank you for that. That to me very much weighs in favor of, to the extent that suggestion is agreed upon here, to have it be under community and planning, because it ensures that it won't suffer from the potential problem of in absence of anyone taking leadership over it, and which I think then could actually lead to some inconsistent decisions being made in terms of depending on who's actually making it. So my suggestion would be, which I'm also happy to put into a motion, would be that we modify the language where it says town manager or her designee into community and planning, or whatever
It would be the Community Development Director.
community development director.
I have no objection to that based on the feedback from staff.
It's very thoughtful.
Yeah, I don't think that's a problem at all.
So we got one question.
Just
Yes.
point of order. These suggestions do not have to be incorporated into your resolution because again, your resolution only deals with those two zoning ordinance changes. So these suggestions to be incorporated into 19B, you can just make those as comments. We'll put that in the staff report that goes forward to the city council or to the town council.
But isn't the proposed reg an attachment to the resolution?
No, the exhibit 2, which is the chapter 19B, the new part of the Public Works part of the municipal code, is just for information purposes and for your comments, but not part of your resolution.
So I'm Bob, I'm trying to find again the draft resolution. Does
That will be
mean
exhibit 1, and then it has exhibit A to exhibit 1 is the actual text changes to the zoning code.
So, and anyone can point this out to me. So the draft resolution then
Team B.
is intended to make findings, putting aside CEQA findings, make findings that the proposed amendments are consistent with the municipal code, et cetera. But where we use the language in the draft resolution, proposed amendments, the term proposed amendments, are those amendments 19?
No, those are, again, because both the municipal code and state law give the planning commission the responsibility of commenting on zoning ordinance amendments only. The fact that we're also amending another part of the municipal code, that's not within the planning commission purview, but again, we're happy to transmit these thoughts and suggestions to the town council, and they will see this combined as one ordinance.
The draft resolution is speaking to a change to the zoning as it relates to that area. The resolution then is kind of falling under, or the proposed regs then are kind of falling under that. With respect to once it's rezoned, then that reg comes into play.
Well, again, the council ordinance will have both the changes to the zoning code that you're seeing in your resolution, and then also this 19B So those would be combined. So your comments on 19B, we will be happy to transmit those for their consideration. But your specific legal authority relates to the zoning code amendments.
Yeah, understood. Thank you, Bob. That's an important clarification. I actually think it would be both appropriate and a good idea to include a recommendation specifically in the resolution recommending to town council that they adopt language as we laid out to 19B. And I don't think, and I'll ask our town council if I may, I don't see there's any reason why we could not include that in our resolution as a recommendation.
I think it's fine to include in the resolution. I think, it's, you're speaking to the land use change. Here, you're allowing a use that was not in the zoning code, and part of that is sort of how that's being facilitated. So, you can add a recommendation in the resolution, and then.
Which obviously the town
council
council
can-
is not required to adopt. They could
Right,
disregard
exactly,
if they wanted to.
exactly.
Yeah.
So they can take it or
Never
leave it.
happened.
So I'm assuming we would add that in section 2 of the resolution, under recommendations, we would add, an additional, we'd bifurcate that into 2. In the second recommendation would be for council to consider the recommended changes to chapter 19B.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is my idea that I propose to the two of you that we do.
Great. Okay, well, I'll invite Commissioner Said to make the resolution, to make the motion.
So I will move that we adopt the draft resolution, which is specified as Exhibit 1, with the change that we add in Section 2 an additional recommendation of the language that we discussed. That would be a new subpart 7 to subdivision A of chapter 19B, as well as using the term community development director in place of the town manager or its designee.
I'll second the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Very good.